Welcome to the Confessions of a Recovering Landlord podcast, where we let you in on the secrets commercial landlords would prefer you not know. Brought to you always by Riata Commercial Realty. We exclusively represent users of office and warehouse properties. Landlords have representation. Do you? Hey, in today's podcast, we get to interview a new friend we recently made, David George with CRUX. Bob, tell our listeners how you met David.
I commented on something that he posted on LinkedIn, and he didn't totally agree with my response. And he commented on it, and it was great because I love it when you can put something out there, and if you disagree a bit, but you can still have a rational conversation about it. I think that's a great thing. And it seems so rare these days in the environment of, if you disagree with me, just unfriend me now.
Get off my Spotify platform.
Exactly. So anyway, it wasn't like we had any real disagreement or a row, but we just, I posted and he clarified. And as a result, I went and checked him out. And then I said, hey, would you connect with me on LinkedIn, number one, and would you be a guest on our podcast?
So that's why he was so angry through the whole podcast. I wondered why. I didn't know the backstory.
That's why we didn't have the video. We only had the audio, so people couldn't see his face.
Actually, he has quite a bit of British civility to our Texan brashness. So I think it's a great interview. Listen on. Today on the podcast, we're going across the pond. Happy to introduce you to our new friend, David George, CEO and founder of CRUX, which stands for Corporate Real Estate User Experience. One of their key lines I particularly like, I just found this on your website earlier. Work is what you do, not where you go. Welcome to the show, David. Tell us a little bit about CRUX.
Hi, Jan. Hi, Bob. Thank you for your time. So CRUX really sprang out of our UK company, which is all about workplace and work and people, and help people really do their very best work wherever they are, whether that's in an office or whether that's working remotely. And it's built on sort of 35 years of experience for myself, always being on a client side of an organization, 20 years at the BBC, and then the last sort of 17 years doing consultancy work, helping people really do their very best work. And that translates into creating designs of the workplace that enable them to do that, working practices, and supported by the right technology. We call it hybrid working today. We've called it agile working for the last 20 years in the UK.
Oh, I like that. Agile.
Yeah. Agile, so mobility, internal and external mobility, and freedom of time and place. And so we felt, just as the pandemic was hitting the US, what a great time to start a business in the US and bring the business over there as well. So we set up in San Diego in 2020.
So why San Diego, by the way?
Oh, well, why not San Diego?
Yeah, well, exactly. I've been there.
Have you been there?
Yeah, it's a great place.
Well, to be fair, I spent quite a bit of time in New York originally and investigating there and finding the marketplace there. But I found that, with the life sciences, the media, the software and technology business on the West Coast, and a kind of more relaxed attitude to work, it was an easier fit for us over there. And hey, San Diego, the weather's fine, it's warm all year round. What's not to like, right?
Yeah, great place. We love it.
So in doing this line of work, what trends are you starting to see as employees do come back into the office?
Well, it's interesting you say that because I think everybody's extremely cautious, very cautious at this point in time. Big enterprises are concerned about exposing employees to risk, still around, as Omicron starts to die away around the COVID. But we are seeing, organizations who had fixed dates previously. We're going to come back in time for Thanksgiving. We're going back in time for our holidays. We're going to come back in time for January. And then that's kind of falling away. So we're seeing a big trend towards, hey, guys, we're just going to go with the flow. We're going to see how things work out. And we're going to return when we think it's safe. We're probably going to give you 4 weeks notice. So, come back from your holiday destinations and come back to where you can commute to the work. And the other half of people are saying we're going to start around Q1, Q2, but most people are shying away from a fixed return to the office type date.
You're seeing more like essential workers having to come back quicker?
Yeah, I think to be fair, most businesses have had their offices open throughout the entire pandemic, subject to local mandates and health guidance and that kind of thing, right? And so most businesses where they've had operational workers who have to be in the place because of equipment or support operations, they've been going in and out under sort of very strict safety procedures. So it's not fair to say that people haven't been going in. But of course, employees have become quite comfortable working from home and feel almost entitled to work from home. So actually, the question is, how do we encourage them to come back if that's the mandate that the company feels is best for the business? And that itself is a challenge and a long conversation about whether it is right to bring them back.
One of the things we've noticed, because we work with clients both in office properties and warehouse properties, people in warehouses, manufacturing, distribution, et cetera, logistics, they've never missed a beat. In fact, they're busier than ever. All their people have been coming to the quote office all along. And so there are companies like, big manufacturers, all the car manufacturers, et cetera. They have a huge population of their employees that are in the factories doing the distribution. They've never stopped coming to the office. And yet everybody that's in the true office buildings at the corporate offices, support, et cetera, they've all been working from home. So it's almost like it's created this sort of dual, I don't don't want to use the word class because I don't like that, but I don't know what to call it. But how does a company navigate that kind of situation?
Oh, therein lies the challenge, because what's being demonstrated during the pandemic is, and I've got research to prove this, that a lot of companies, particularly in the software and technology field, have grown significantly during the pandemic. 20 and 30% are being reported on. So they're saying, well, okay, if we're growing at 20, 30% when the office-based staff are working remotely, why is it the staff will say, why are we wanting to go back into the office if we're doing really well whilst we're working from home? And you're right, if you go from state to state across the US, you find that every state has a different approach to it. If you spend a lot of time in Phoenix, which I've done, they kind of shut down for 4 weeks. And since then, it kind of, pretty much back in the office most of the time. And so there's different risk profiles that people are taking. And it brings me to a really important point that there is no such thing as a one size fits all, either in how we work or where we work or the level of in-office versus remote working. It has to be work through on a company by company, department and a team by team basis to make that really work. So yeah, operations staff have been there throughout. Office staff had a little bit of choice. I think the challenge now is, because the office staff are so vocal, is what does that return look like and why should they return?
So in knowing all this information, what purpose should the office actually serve?
Well, that's a really good question, because it depends which lens you're looking through. If you're looking through the lens of the employer, that they feel that the office is a very proud place for them, it shows how successful they've been. I've had CEOs say to me, well, the bigger the office, the better, because it shows to our competitors and our clients how successful we have been. It also shows how much money you're spending on overheads as well, of course. And they want it because they want to preserve a culture they spend years building. And if you think about it, CEOs my age, in nearly 100 now, they have a success model which is built on their 20, 30, 40 years of working in an office with their routines and processes and practices and behaviours that they're used to. And that's their success model. And now we've kind of unpicked that a little bit during the pandemic, but as creatures of habit, we want to get back to what we're comfortable with. And so people, at a high level who feel they're successful pre-pandemic want to get back to where they're comfortable in some way or other. So they want you to come back because that's how they're comfortable. But actually, there are some good reasons for being in the office. And that is that, onboarding people is best done in a place, because most new recruits learn through the apprenticeship model still, which means that you observe what's going around you. So behaviors and processes and problem solving and managers you can go to and say, how do you do this, how do you do that, and they learn how to operate in an office environment. We know that ideation and brainstorming is more intuitive when you're actually together and having a conversation and sharing ideas, particularly when you're doing design-oriented and creative activities. Those things can of course be done working remotely, and there's lots of technology to try and support that. But actually, you just can't beat being together in the same place, having ideas and having that banter, which gives you the chance, the third person in the room thing where, you two of you have an idea and it's actually the coming together, those two ideas, that creates a new idea, best done in place. So learning and development, ideation, collaboration, and also if you think about a completely distributed workforce, everybody's working in their own little bubble. And what we're used to as companies is to work collectively, because that creates a collective culture for an organization, or certainly collective cultures within teams or departments. That starts to become fragmented when you work remotely. Now, these things don't change overnight. So a lot of this hasn't been spotted during the course of the pandemic because it's a slow change. But if you look back over the last couple of years, I've also got evidence of reduced innovation. Productivity has done well, but innovation in product design and development has fallen away, has reduced. And that only becomes evident as you go through the design and development cycle. So good reasons are coming back in to collaborate, ideate, knowledge exchange, train and learn and develop, and keep the culture that you work the way you want it to do. Good reasons for not coming in are that actually quite a lot of focus work and general process work happens much better away from the distractions of an office environment. And actually people tend to give more. They tend to trade some of their commute for doing work. They tend to, they don't go out and spend money to get their coffee, and they don't go out and spend money to get their food. They stay at home. So actually it works quite well. This may, of course, change now with the current issue around utilities and gas prices and things going up, and people may feel, actually, I'd rather my employer pays to heat or cool my work environment than me paying to heat or cool it when I'm at home.
Well, to follow up with that, so I just had a quick follow up.
Go ahead.
If coming back into the office is for collaboration and ideation and jumbling around ideas, how will the hybrid office work? Because say I work Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and Bob works Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Yeah. And I go back into the office and it's half staff and it's kind of lonely, and it's Sally over in purchasing and I don't ever really see her. I mean, how do you get that buzz going if I'm not back at 90 to 100%?
Well, firstly, two things. Firstly, is that the office isn't just about collaboration. I didn't mean to say it was only collaboration, because some people actually prefer to go to a place to work, or they can't work at home, so they actually want to go into that place. They find it easier to mentally switch off at the end of the day by going home and by coming into work in the morning. How do we work in the office? Well, it's all about team agreements. It's all about working with your team manager as it goes up through the chain of control in an organization, and agreeing what should be a core team day for you to be in office. Now, we always recommend don't choose a Wednesday, because everyone's used to the midweek peak where everyone comes in on a Wednesday, or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. No one wants to come on a Friday, and some people begrudgingly come on a Monday, right? So you have to structure it that we want to create an environment which is vibrant and collaborative, as you've just said, Jan. So you want there to be a reasonable quantity of people in the workplace. So you have to structure it that way. So if you were in sales and I was in marketing, we work together, our managers would have a conversation and say, hey, our team day is going to be a Monday because we know we can get in. Mass transport is less busy. We can get a space in the parking lot. We know we can get into the cafeteria and the restaurant, and it's all easy. So ours is Monday. Could you make yours Monday as well? And then you give your team flex days for the rest of the week or rest of the month, depending on what schedule you're working on. This does two things. One, it ensures that you have a reasonable consistency of people within the office, so you do have collaboration going on, and you do have that vibrant community you're trying to. But also it means that if you look at the real estate midweek peak, you can flatten that peak, which either gives you opportunity to release some space, or it allows the opportunity for the company to grow into the space because you're working at a ratio, you're working at a shared environment now in that space. So it's hard to do though, Jan, because each of us comes with a personal bias. If you live 30, 40, 50 miles away and it's a 2-hour drive along the freeway to get into the office, and you're running a team, you may be biased to think, I'm going to come in one day a week. Guys, it's okay one day a week. But actually what's right for their career development and your product or your service you're producing and the company might be more than that. So there's a big thing around training, but we'll come on to that hopefully later on.
So what does all this mean for the real estate then? You kind of alluded to having that peak in the middle of the week, and you can flatten that maybe with your real estate. So how are you seeing companies doing this in practice, realigning their real estate needs and the office design to be consistent with the way they're actually using that space now?
Well, as we've just said with Jan there, we've kind of determined that a majority of the office space needs to be for collaboration and for interaction with other people, and a smaller amount for focus. So if you think about a traditional office pre-pandemic, it would have been probably 70, 80%, cubicle, workstations, desking, whatever model you have, and 20% formal office spaces. And if you're lucky, maybe a restaurant or a coffee shop or a kitchen area to have a breakout in. We're expecting to see that flip. And in fact, we know from the work we've been doing for Agile working for the last 20 years that we would expect to see probably a 30% reduction in space And we probably see sort of 60 to 70% of it now being collaborative type work settings. And that's a broad range of informal through to formal work settings to support those various collaboration activities, and the remainder being more focused working.
So to be clear, I just want to follow up on what you just said. So are you suggesting that an overall, if we look at all office space being used in the UK or the US or wherever, that you're predicting a 30% reduction in overall office requirements for all companies combined?
I thought you might pick up on that. It depends.
Of course I will. I get paid by people leasing space.
Okay, let me break this to you gently then. It depends on the starting point, really. If you imagine you're an office building which got 6x8 or 6x6 cubes in there, or if you're a building which has already had pre-pandemic some flexible working in there, you're going to see different results out at the end of it. Let me give you an example. We've just finished a project for a global company, their headquarter building. It has 1,570 people in it. And going through the process of understanding how we can best enable them to work, what work settings they really needed, and the team arrangements around days in office and days working remotely, we reduced their footprint not by 30% actually, but by 40%. It was a 40% reduction. Now that saved them $13.5 million over the remaining 5 years of their lease. So that's the size of the prize, but that's not our starting point, right? Our starting point was, how can we enable these people to do their very best work? Because that's actually what the employer wants, right? They want to have the highest productivity, the best performing staff, the employees who are going to hang around and be loyal to the business and take them forward, right? That's what they want. They don't actually want real estate at all. But, the real estate enables that. And once you've done the analysis of what they need to support them, you can decide what to do with the 10, 20, 30 or 40% which is left over. And as I said, it could be event space, it could be sublet, it could be let a lease go somewhere.
That's very consistent with the way we view real estate and the way we advise clients, because we tell them all the time that your occupancy cost is typically the second highest expense behind all the payroll related stuff and benefits.
Right.
The difference is that you can theoretically hire and fire people quickly, but you can't get in and out of leases fast. And once you've signed that 5, 10, 15-year lease, you're pretty much stuck with it during that period of time. And yeah, you can sublease it maybe, but that's expensive. You don't get to recover all your costs. So you really need to be leasing space very cautiously and from the standpoint of, let's not take any more than we have to. And by all means, make sure that it's consistent with the goals and objectives of the company and the organization, I should say, because sometimes our clients are nonprofit as well. Mm-hmm. So, it sounds like we're very much singing off the same page there, because we feel like, in fact, we office from home. And so people will sometimes kind of poke fun at me because they're like, wait a minute, you help companies go out and find properties to lease or buy for their occupancy, and yet you office from home. And my response is absolutely, because it's not about my office and it's about their office. So I'm going to them, number one. Number two, this works for our business. And why incur that overhead when we don't need to? There's no added value for that.
Right. And I haven't had my own assigned desk since 1995. I've worked in a flex way since then, both, in terms of location, but, it kind of brings you onto the question about flex space, doesn't it, really, I suspect? Yeah.
And flex space, by the way, we need to clarify, flex space in your context means flexible space like a co-working or an executive suite, not what we would call flex, which is sort of like an office warehouse. So, but yeah, go ahead.
Well, let's go there, shall we? So for me, I would call flex space is obviously an acronym for flexible space. It could be a collaboration space. It could be co-working facilities. It could be space as a service. It could be your local. There's a few hotel chains have really fabulous co-working spaces on the ground floor, on the first floor now, where you can just drop in and use it, and you buy a coffee, and that's all you need to do in those spaces. And they have the fastest Wi-Fi, and it's a great environment. So flex space is really, really handy when you're a startup, because you grow rapidly. You never know how quick you're going to grow. So it's easy because often you can do a monthly or 6 monthly or yearly contract for that space. It's really good for some parts of a big enterprise organization like design and development, maybe marketing, where you're flexing the scale, and for projects as well. It's good as part of a hub and spoke strategy. So for instance, you may have your main headquarters building, but you realize when you look at the way that we're going to work going forwards, actually you need some hubs for people to come together, but you don't need to own the asset. You don't need to have a major lease, but you can either have a membership card to go into a place, or you can lease an area, rent an area on a service basis within one of these buildings. So there are a number of different models where flex fits quite comfortably into it, or space as a service.
Okay, so both of y'all have been talking about new ways of working. How do you get a company to go about agreeing to what the vision should be going forward?
Well, going back to the earlier comment about no one size fits all, that's the same within an organization as well. If you think about a large organization, how the accounting team works, the finance team works, it's very different to how the projects or design and development team work, or the marketing team work. So you can't just say, it would be, not best informed to say, hey, everybody, we're going to do this. Because you might want to have some constraints broadly that we want to see most people in the office, sort of a day or 2 days or 3 days or 5 days a month, whatever it might be. But actually the working mechanisms need to happen at team level with the manager. And I mentioned earlier about the fact that managers need to be trained in order to do this, to agree the days in office, the core day in office, the flex day in office, and what are good reasons for coming in and what are good things to do at home in terms of work. And you have to do that in conjunction with the teams that you collaborate with. So you build up a mesh of working arrangements based on the activity. So activity-based analysis. We use a tool which is called our work experience tool, which does it remotely and automatically across enterprise size organizations. So we can collate the activities which are best undertaken in the workplace, and that then derives the exact space budget and the exact number of work settings you need for the space. So you have the working principles, how we're going to work. You have the space. And we kind of learned that technology hasn't really been an inhibitor over the course of the pandemic. No one's really suffered with technology. It's been the smallest. It's been the 5% in all our scales where people had problems with that. So once you understand process and you can design place, it's a question of change management then. And that is helping people understand about, it's our space to share, not yours to own. And we use the space collectively as an organization and as a team. And I don't believe in having everything unassigned, because as humans, we're creatures of habits. We like to have a home to come back to, and that's not going to change. Most people will park their car in the same parking lot. They'll sit on the same train on the same chair on the train when they go in. And we have routines and things and habits, and this is normal. So we create neighborhoods, which are like a hub for that team goes, and they base themselves in that team, but in a shared working environment. And if you bring those things together, there's no quick solution, Jan. You can't just say, this is what we're going to do and expect it to work. It takes many, many weeks or in fact some months. Usually that process takes something like 20 weeks to go through from the start to the finish in terms of the change management journey. Because people, also people have forgotten how to work in an office, right? You think about people coming out of school in 2020, they've gone into work, they've worked from home for 2 years, and they're going to come into the workplace and suddenly they're going to be supervisors and managers, but with no understanding of behaviors and processes when they come into the workplace. And I was having a lovely conversation with a professor at a university a few nights back, and they were saying that the kids were coming back into the classroom, but were behaving in a very strange way because they weren't used to being amongst others in a classroom learning environment. And I think, we'll find some of that if we are coming back to the office in numbers. So the change manager is a really, really important part of that, getting a new way of working to work.
Just getting people to put on clothes and take off their pajamas is probably going to be item number one.
You can see from there.
Yeah, everybody stand up now. Are you all wearing pants? So, one of the things I was interested in is how do you, when you get an assignment, how do you get the company and the employees to start discussing the benefits? Because I'm assuming you have to focus on the benefits to both parties in all this as to why hybrid's good, why coming back to the office is good, whatever the solution is. How do you get that going to make sure that both parties are really focused on the benefits to each other?
It's particularly hard from the corporate level, from the CEO and exec level, because traditionally most companies are used to a control approach. I've said, therefore you shall do approach. Whereas really that's not going to work anymore. And everyone would have seen headlines like the great resignations, because people are moving away from companies they fear aren't going to give them flexibility to companies they think are going to give them more flexibility. There's also a little bit of pent-up demand over the pandemic. People didn't move. That's going to come out from that as well. But the CEO is the hardest, and this is all about having a really good narrative about the reasons why it is important for people to come together. And the CNOs take off the control hat and say, actually, what is good for the company for them to come together, and what is good for the employee to come together, and create the story around the benefits to the company, like consistent approach, consistent processes, a culture for the organization, onboarding new people into the business so they have a consistent approach, they learn quickly from people around them, that actually innovation remains strong and develops going forward. And these are good reasons why we'd like you to come in. We also like the improvement in social networks and working networks in an organization. And actually, some of those are beneficial for the employee too. Having good social networks make you happier at work. And having good business networks makes you more connected, which means you're able to learn quicker and progress quicker. And despite what everybody says, about, we can train managers to work in a hybrid way, we can. There will undoubtedly be some challenges to start with. For instance, visibility bias, I call it, which is that I can see you, Bob, you're in the desk next to me, you're doing great work, great. We haven't seen Jan for a few days. What's she doing? Bob, could you pick up this special project for me? And then when it comes to kind of like, hey, we've got a vacancy, right? We're going to promote somebody. Hey, Bob's around the whole time. He's doing all the work, but I don't see much of Jan. But it may be that Jan's actually doing better work. But as a poor manager, I'm looking at you being present, you being there, rather than outputs. So we have to train the managers to move towards outcomes or outputs, rather than just whether Bob's sitting at his computer doing stuff.
So you've been coached by Jan in that story right then, I guess.
I was just thinking Bob got to go to happy hour and Jan didn't. There's that socialization that, it's 5:30. Hey, why don't we go downstairs, get a drink, and talk about this a little further? There's just some cachet there that occurs that just isn't going to happen in a remote environment.
Well, you can't see people. Why? Yeah. I mean, how can you see their benefits and their the good things about them that you wouldn't have otherwise seen if you can't see them? They're invisible.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because people think that young people want to work from home all the time, but actually young people want to engage and be part of something, and they want to be recognized for what they do. So they want flexibility and choice, right? That's what they want. So they want flexibility and choice in terms of days, in terms of time, really, really important in terms of timing, start times and finish times. They want flexibility in that, and then flexibility in location. But actually they do better in social networks. When you come out of school, you leave your networks behind, right? You go into a workplace, you create new networks. If they're not creating those, they're going to be less loyal to the organization because they have less attachment emotionally to the organization. So it's better for the organization to improve the stickiness, if you like, of having employees, that actually you have these social networks. So Jan, you're quite right. Going for a beer or a pizza after work, it's perhaps not the best example, but when you're there, you actually bond with people quicker than you do working remotely. So it's important for them. The challenge we have, though, well, back to your point, is that decision-making organizations tend to be older. They know their job very well. They have strong networks. They have good connections. They know who to go to. They know how to get stuff done, right? So they're comfortable. They're comfortable in that. Younger people coming in, they're anxious about their work. They're anxious about getting approval for the work. They haven't got the strong network. From our research, we know that new people coming in have a good bond with their manager because they make a good effort, and with their immediate team. But they have very fragile networks wider than that. They don't understand their part in the bigger machine of the business. And so, therefore, they are less loyal to the company. So if you come along and offer them $5 an hour more, they're more likely to jump to a new employer for the money than stay with you because of the culture and because of the feeling of being part of a team and feeling part of something bigger and being respected and valued by people. And those things are harder to achieve if you solely work in a remote way.
Yeah. Well, so then let's get down to the back to the real estate question. We touched on this earlier, but when you're the VP of real estate, VP of real estate for a large company that's not in the real estate business, how does she make informed decisions about how much space they're going to need and what it's going to look like at that point when their lease ends? And correct me if I'm wrong, are you seeing most of these companies making these decisions when the lease ends, or are they doing it earlier? I guess you gave us an example earlier about, over the rest of their 5-year lease, they saved $13.5 million. So they must have been making that decision long before the lease expired. So walk us through that.
So they took an opportunity. They had a break clause, a break at least, so they could walk away from it at a certain point. So they were aiming towards that. And as it happened, they had another tenant very willing to take it on because of the proximity to their other headquarters building. So the challenge is this, Bob, is that it's not as simple just like do a calculation on this. You have to do what we've just described, which is understand how the organization, how the employees best work. So you have to do the deep dive analysis with the employees. You have to moderate that with manager interviews to understand, how their team really needs to work, where they should work, and who they should really be collaborating with. So you have the employee data, you have the manager data, and you have then to take this information to the board, because the board, being those people who enjoyed working from home or want to get back, but they're only looking at it through their mature networks mindset, you have to bring them this data and say, this is how your employees want to work, this is how your managers want to moderate it. Let's describe how we can articulate this in a vision for the organization. And when you can have that vision, then you can do the calculation that says we need this much collaboration space, this much focus space, this much alternative use space. What's a contingency look like? And this is our probable requirement. So I'm moving my fingers up and down on this podcast so you can see. We can move it from the possible requirement down to the probable requirement. So if you're out looking for 60,000 square feet, we might be able to say to you, rather than going for between 50 and 70,000 square feet, actually, we can narrow it between 45 and 50. So we can give you that much closer range to what's going to suit you going forwards than just taking a finger in the air. And, whilst earlier when I said, you can reduce it 10, 20, 30, 40%, which one are you going to pick? So you have to you're going to have to know what your starting point is, know what the future way of working is going to look like, do the analysis, and then do the calculation on space. And that takes about 8 to 12 weeks to do that. Now, that means you have to start the journey earlier than you thought you had to start it in terms of making a decision about, getting a new lease or whatever.
So where do you start? I mean, you mentioned the journey. So, this is not an overnight thing. What's the first step? I mean, you've talked about a lot of interviews and that kind of stuff, but I mean, you got to get some buy-in first, right?
Well, the first thing is you have to have awareness in the organization that things are going to be different, right? And that you're not just going to go on doing what you did previously. I think it would be a little short-sighted to think that everyone's going to come back and do what they did before. And to Jan's point earlier on, if only 30 or 40% come back into the workplace, it's not going to feel like a great place to work when you've got rows and rows of desks or workstations or cubicles. So you have to have awareness, and that means that the director or the vice president of real estate, or whatever the title is of somebody who's charged with making those kind of early decision, knows that there's a process to go through. What usually happens then in our experience is you get invited in to have a conversation with the CEO or CFO in particular, because they're always keen to save money, right? Right. And you explain to them about the model of hybrid working, if you want to call it hybrid, or agile or flexible working, and what this likely means in terms of potential for them to save money or to stay in the existing building and continue their expansion without moving to a new building, or to diversify from a central to a hub and spoke. We're having some smaller flex spaces or regional offices and keep a central one. So you talk about the art of the possible. This is what you could do, one of these models. But I can't come with solutions until I understand how your people need to work to do their work. So you go through that engagement process. You then interview middle managers to find out what they think the risks and opportunities look like, and whether there's a change in product design or service and they want to change the way they're working. You moderate that, take the evidence of the engagement process, which is activity-based analysis evidence, collaboration evidence, who they collaborate with on a regular basis in virtual and also in person, and what the manager wants to see, and you set it out for the executive to view, and you help them build a vision statement around this new way of working. And then that is your anchor, which you line everything to. So you can say, this is the vision statement, which might mean something like, we allow our employees to work whenever they feel they can achieve the best outcomes in the best way possible. And you can then say, we align technology to that, we align the workplace design to that, we align how much real estate we need to that, and where that real estate should be, or whether we don't have it, it's a flex space. So it is a process. Yeah.
How do you factor in location? Because like here in Texas, it's pretty much you do you, I do me. If you want to go to work, fine. You want to wear a mask, fine. You want to get vaccinated, fine. You don't, that's fine too. But what if you're working with a big company that has decided to mandate vaccinations for everyone, and so they're going to lose people by attrition that aren't going to get vaccinated? How do you project the space that's going to be needed, and oh, the CDC said this, I got to ramp back, or no. I mean, it seems like it's one more layer you have to factor in there, and they just seem to be all over the board. Every week it's something new.
I think the vaccination question was a curveball for me. I know what I meant. But
You're welcome.
No, but it's like anything which is uncertain. That you mitigate it through a strategy which gives you options. And so I would say in that situation. So we've just finished a piece of work for a global company, 5,000 employees, 13 countries and 20 different locations. Wow. And they make the software company. They design and develop their products across different time zones, which in itself brings challenges for them, right? Mm-hmm. Which we identified as part of our process, actually, as a side product. But where you have a large resource pool, for instance, they may be putting a particular product development in India, maybe, or in China, or in Texas, or Austin, wherever you want to put it, or Phoenix, in fact. You're looking to have a hub. And then depending on whether you grow or contract, you use flex space. So if you're starting a new business, the last thing you're going to do is go and take out a lease from 10,000 square feet before you've even got a business to run. You start off in a flex space and you grow as you go. So we'll look at what is the core requirement. What is the core requirement in a particular region? And we'll drill right down to the core, and then additional space is provided by flex. And if we find over a period of years we're consistently using quite a lot of flex, then we'll review our strategy for going forward and say, actually, we can bring some of this flex into our own core. We can reduce the cost by doing it this way. We are now certain it works this location. No one's got a crystal ball, Jan, that's going to tell us what happens in the next couple of years. It's really going to be to see. But the one thing I would always stipulate for anybody who's making a change is to run a pilot project. The whole new way of working needs to be proven and tested. And the best way to do that is to choose a pilot project, whether that's a building, a floor, a team, a country, and trial out the new way of working with the new furniture system, new technology systems, and learn from it. Because one thing's right, it won't be right first off. There will need to be changes to it, and you can't fail in a test environment because you're there to test and try ideas. So you test and try ideas for maybe 3 or 4 months, and then you learn from that and use the learnings from that to do your rollout. So pilot project first before doing a complete renovation of existing office space.
Seems like the last 2 years of our lives have been one long test pilot project.
Yeah. And what would you say you learned from it, Bob? You learned actually you can do quite a bit of your work at home, but actually you miss people and you want to be back chatting to people. And we were sort of starved to socializing, weren't we, with shelter in place and all those kind of lockdown things that we had. And we missed that most of all. And that really perhaps discolored our view on what remote working could be for the first year of the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, I've been working from home for 7.5 years now. Mm-hmm. And so when the pandemic hit, it didn't change my my office behavior because that was still in the house, so big deal. What it changed the most for me and what I've missed the most is the freedom of and the ease of just saying, hey, let's go to lunch. Let's have that meeting in person, the trade association meeting or the whatever meeting. And what I've also found is that you now have to give people a really strong reason why they should leave home to go to something in person. Can't we just do this on Zoom? I mean, I had a meeting earlier today where it was supposed to have been in person with a Zoom feature on the side for anybody that couldn't come. And based on the responses I got from people, I just said, all right, we're just going to do it all on Zoom. We're not going to do it in person at all because I knew I'd be sitting there in a conference room by myself. And so that has really changed things. And I missed that freedom or that to go where I wanted when, but also the confidence that people will actually be there when I get there.
I think part of it is we have grown so impatient because I get up in the morning and I can tell you pretty much every moment of the day what I'm going to be doing, where I'm going to be, how I'm going to be doing it. And if you have to throw in, a commute, and then there was a wreck on 635, that took an extra 20 minutes. All that getting me out of my usual environs causes frustration. It blew my whole day because I didn't have an extra 20 minutes baked in. I mean, it's interesting to me how our world has become so much smaller in some ways and so much bigger in other ways, because I'll Zoom with people all over the country now, across the pond, as evidenced right now.
Yeah.
And yet I don't have the time to drive across town because there's going to be a wreck. And there shoots my schedule.
I think it's certainly accelerated how we do work, hasn't it? Because we click on a meeting, you expect everybody there straight away, whereas a meeting in person, Bob always turns up 5 minutes late because he's going to get a coffee just too late for the next meeting, right? And so, you have that kind of mentality.
You know him well.
But
not except I don't like coffee.
But then, the Zoom fatigue that hit us pretty hard in 2020 was because we wanted to be connected with one another the whole time. And we didn't work out for some time how to have those informal conversations well. But what you've seen there, Bob, is that when you have those strong networks, you know who to go to. You can socialize with your business colleagues through your own network because you know who to go to. But when you start with an organization and you're early in career, you don't have any of that. So your world gets really, really small. It's down to who do you see on a Zoom call and who does your manager call you can have a conversation with. You don't see the bigger picture. And I hear stories of people who went back into the office for the first time and they joined the company during the pandemic, and they walk through the front door and they go, wow, this is what you're about. Place is so important with that. And another fabulous story, CEO of APAC interviewing them for a piece of change work, and she had just started there during the pandemic. Never met anybody face to face, but had met all of her kind of exec team through Zoom calls. And then an opportunity came when the COVID died down a bit to fly and to meet. And she said they were in a room, and she walked into the room, started talking to these people. She said within 1 minute, her view of them had changed completely to meet them on Zoom. She felt so much warmer and closer to them, and the relationship so much richer by actually meeting them in person. Her opinion changed completely within 1 minute of being in the room.
So, that's so interesting. Our son works for a company based in Dallas, but they have a fully distributed workforce. So some people work from home in states all across the country, but they also have some people in other countries. And in fact, the guy that he now reports to is a British guy living in France who he's never met in person. And they just had their quote global summit, and everybody was supposed to be coming to Dallas. Well, best laid plans. Somebody got COVID, somebody tested positive, somebody, this or that, or just didn't feel comfortable. And so a few people didn't come, and he was really, really disappointed. Now he loved it because he got to see a lot of the people, but he didn't get to see everybody, including his boss. So he still has not met his boss in person other than through Zoom.
And I think the bonds are stronger when you have met people in person, and there's a warmth and empathy for the person when you meet them, which is hard to replicate when we sit in a virtual environment. But we shouldn't say that the virtual environment is all bad for communication. It's particularly good when you want to do all hands presentations, for instance. You get far higher number of people rocking up for a Zoom meeting. Of your 100 people who might come, you're probably going to get 90 to 100 coming. But in person, you're probably going to get 60 to 70 rocking up for it. So you get a better attendance, because when one person is on transmit, right, this is ideal way of doing it. But when we're on transeive and ideate and exchange and iterate, it's harder because Jan wants to talk to me, then you start talking, Bob, and I can't hear what Jan's saying, and I want to say something as well, right? It's hard. We haven't got the interaction available on the audio.
So one question I had, I'm looking at your website, which, by the way, for the listeners, the website is CRUX, CRUX-workplace.com. And under the projects tab, it shows a lot of the clients that you've worked with. And you have a real mix there of companies, governments, quasi-governmental entities. So, I see Land Rover, I see BBC, I see Thomson Reuters. There's a lot of well-known names on here. My question, though, is how different is it working with a governmental entity versus a for-profit entity and doing what you do?
Well, I should be careful I answer that, shouldn't I? Well, we work for organizations who value their employees, because actually what we do is about valuing employees and enable them to do their best work, right? And in my experience, government organizations are really good at that, actually. They are really good at valuing their employees. And so we have got a lot of work through that area. things tend to move at a slightly slower pace, let's put it that way, with those organizations because of risk of decision making. And decision making is a troublesome thing in places like health services and government services. We do a lot on both of those areas back in the UK. Whereas, and it tends to be more consultative. You want to get everybody involved in it. Everyone has a say. Everyone has a chance to shape the end product, which in a way is good to have the consultation, but hard to design by committee, right? So you need to have a little more structure. For sharp-nosed business people, they tend to be more autocratic. They tend to give direction. I want to do this. I want to do this. So for them, we're trying to pull them back a little bit and say, hey, let's just have a little bit more consultation. Let's involve more people in the process, because one of the keys to success in a change program, which is what this all is, it has real estate in it, sure, has workplace, has technology, but it's a change program, is to engage people along the journey so they feel like they've designed the outcome with you rather than having it forced upon them. So you have to have, a leader who walks the talk. You have to have a engagement plan that involves people, and then you have a communication plan which manages and sets expectations about the journey ahead. Those three things are the key to success in all of this.
I feel like we've just had a session of British civility teaching Texas brashness how it works. I love it. It takes such great, huge concepts and puts them in bite-sized pieces. I really get. And I like the way you talked about drill down what the core reason is and build from there. And I just think all these gems were so worthwhile. We thank you for your time.
Thank you for inviting me. I've had a splendid time. You've taxed me a little bit, asking me a few curveball questions, but I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Just making sure you were staying awake.
Well, again, for our listeners, crux-workplace.com, CRUX for Crux. And David, is there any other place that they should go to learn more about you?
Just have a wander around the website. We've just launched a new product called the Night Index, which you can Google and find. It's called the Night Index. This is something to help managers in the new hybrid world, helps them assess their strengths and weaknesses in the hybrid world, because particularly we're looking for people who are good at trust, autonomy, and good communication. So look up the Night Index as well. That's our new product just being launched now.
So that's on the same website, but with a / the Night Index, K on that night, KNIGHT. Thank you.
Thank you.
Another one in the books.
Yes.
Sorry, I didn't realize you'd already checked out of the books. I'm all alone in the books.
I'm on to my next thing.
I appreciate y'all, my listeners, tuning in to yet another fascinating episode of Confessions of a Recovering Landlord, brought to you by Riata Commercial Realty.
That'd be me. And
oh,
I almost
and all your staff. Yeah. Next week's episode will be brought to you by Train Wrecks Are Us.
I'm better than I thought you were going to say divorce attorneys are us.
No, you don't get that privilege. I'm going to stay here and make you wish. Okay. Tell the folks how they can find us other than the smoke signals going up.
TexasTenantRep.com is the website. So find us there or call us at
972-677-0028. You obviously never call it.
Well, that's what speed dial's for, right?
Or please go and rate us on all the podcast websites and give us a 5-star rating.
That'd be nice.
See you next week. Bye.